Welcome back to another Spirit Island video. In this video, I'm going to be continuing my major power tier list, this time looking at C tier. Now, here I have C tier is going to be the cards that are good given the right situation, but tend to be niche and get overshadowed by cards in S, A, and B tier. I consider these cards to be slightly below the power threshold. Now, this first line of text is really important in that they're going to be good given the right situation. And I think a lot of players, this is where a lot of disagreement is going to come from, is because there are going to be games where this card, C tier cards, are going to be game winning, but that's not going to be all the time. And that's why they're in C tier. So let's take a look. And we have top of C tier, like C plus, we have middle C tier, and then of course we have bottom C tier over here. And once again, the order at which these cards down here are, they're in no particular order. So, but they are compared to majors in the upper tiers. So, okay, looking at the bottom C tier cards, starting off, we have Blood Rack Plague. It's a 4 energy fast power, water earth animal, 1 range from a sacred site. Add 2 disease for each disease in target land, defend 1 in target land and all adjacent lands. You have the 2/4 threshold, you get 2 fear, and then for each disease in target land, do 1 damage in target or an adjacent land. So this is a pretty, it's a solid card in some matchups. The AoE defend is really nice. The only problem is a lot of times it's only going to be defend 2. So it's an AoE defend 2 for 4 cost, which just tends to be a little bit too weak. I think if this AoE, like I think if the card came with like a defend 1 or defend 2 base, and then you had everything on top, I think it would be very reasonable. But defend 2 is just not good enough into level 6 adversaries. Since it costs 4 energy, you're not going to be playing this until the mid-late game. And once again, defend 2 is just going to be not good enough. Now, it does scale with the number of disease in that land, so if you're comboing it with disease cards, it does get better, which is nice. But unfortunately, a lot of disease cards are overcosted. So that's another thing. Like if this card, if disease was like undercosted throughout the entire deck, then this card I think would see a lot more play. Now the threshold is really strong when you can play it multiple times, and that's another problem with the card is it encourages the player to constantly spam the card. And I mean, I love the card. The card is so much fun, but having to reclaim loop it and that the fact that the card is incentivizing you to replay it multiple times because the damage is scaling with the disease is kind of, I think, a problem. So I think if you redesign the threshold a little bit, where instead of doing damage per disease, well, you could still have it do damage per disease, but then disease would get removed, such that it would encourage less reclaim looping. I think this card would see, I think it'd be more interesting, and I think you can also increase the power of it. But this is a card, like I said, if you just boost the top part just a little bit, I think you'll see a lot more play. So we have our first NI major, and that's Plague Ships Sail to Distant Ports, the 4 energy fast fire, air, water animal, 1 range from a coastal city, or you have to target a coastal city. 1 fear, you get to add 4 disease among coastal lands, and it has to be on any boards other than the target land that you choose. And then if you have this 2/2/2 threshold, you get a fear, you get to do some damage, and then the entire team is able to pay energy slash removing disease to remove a fear card from the deck. And then the card gives you a disease at the very end. So this is a card. It's very niche. I mean, it fits perfectly in that the criteria I listed earlier. There are going to be games where this is going to be one of the best cards that you can pick, and maybe you're playing a 6/6. You have tons of fear cards you have to chew through, but maybe you have tons of energy, and this card can just essentially equal 30, 40 fear, whatever, however big the game is. There are other games where this card just doesn't do anything. Like if I'm playing Prussia, right, I need to win the game. I need cards that can destroy the invaders. And this is a card that's not going to do that. It's just adding disease on the coast. So it's fairly limited. It's going to have text into England, HME, Scotland. Those are like your main adversaries that you'll try to play this card. It's somewhat decent into France, though disease altogether is somewhat unreliable. I think if this card costed 3 energy, I think it'd be very reasonable. But at 4 energy, it's just at that point where a lot of times it's just not good enough. Just like I said earlier, just very, very niche. There are very few situations where you're going to want this card. And then the threshold is easy, but 4 energy for 3 damage, a disease, and a fear just is pretty underwhelming. And then removing fear cards, it's very it just depends on that situation. Okay, so Terrifying Nightmares, it's a 4 energy, fast power, moon air, 2 range, 2 fear, and push 4 towns/explorers. And then if you have 4 more fear, if 4 moon, you get 4 more fear. This is a card that I think could be balanced if I would probably make the top part be able to push a city. I don't know where you would, or what changes you would make exactly. I think it's very close though. I just think the top part needs a little bit more. I think it costing 4 energy is fine. I think the 3 moon or the 4 moon threshold for 4 fear is too much. You're gonna make it have this 4 moon threshold, really make the bottom part of this card exciting, and maybe that's where you add the city movements. Like maybe the top part you say push up to 6, and then if you have this threshold, you get 4 fear plus you can push 2 cities. Like I think at that point, I think the card would see a lot more play and would probably be somewhere in B tier. Okay, Twisted Flowers. It's a 5 energy slow power, sun, moon, air, earth, plant. Sacred Site, 1 range, targeting land with invaders. 4 fear, add a strife. And then if your tier level is 2 or higher, remove 2 invaders. And then if you have the 3/2/3 threshold, you get +3 fear and you get to do 3 damage. Once again, a 3/3/2 threshold, very tough to hit. This bottom part um, really needs to be exceptional, and it's just not. So I would definitely increase the power of the threshold. In addition, I think the change you need to make up here is I think instead of checking at tier level 2, if this just says remove 1 invader per tier level, I think this would be, I think, a lot more reasonable. I think one of the biggest problems with this card is you'll pick this card up or you'll see it in tier level 1, and then you'll never be able to like you. This card is good when you can remove the 2 invaders, but if you're in tier level 1, you're not doing that, and it's just not worth, like 1 strife 4 fear is not worth 5 energy. So just a very slight change here, and I can definitely see it moving at least into high C tier or low B tier. Talons of Lightning, 6 energy fast, fire air, 1 range, targeting a mountain wetland, 3 fear, 5 damage, and then if you have this crazy 3/3 threshold, you can kill a lot of adjacent towns. Once again, 3/3 thresholds are going to be very challenging to hit. The reason why I have it in C tier and not in D tier is because at least it's that fast 5 damage, and fast damage is better than slow damage. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of cases where slow damage could be better, but a lot of times I find this card, the ability that this card has to close out games, can be very advantageous. 5 fear or a 5 damage is essentially 3 fear, so the card is giving us 6 fear, which is basically 1 fear card and half. And then when you compare it to a card like Cleansing Flood, it's like you get more damage, more fear, and you can make it fast. Now, unfortunately, it does have that targeting restriction being Mountain Wetlands, which does hold the card back, as well as the 6 energy cost. I think if this cost 5 energy, I like the target restriction, so I'd leave this. But I think if this was 5 energy, I think it'd be perfectly fine. Um, Actually, it'd probably be a solid B tier card, but at 6 energy, it tends to be a lot for only 5 damage. Okay, Smothering Infestation, 3 energy slow power. It's a water plant, 0 range. You get to add a disease. And then if the land is jungle wetland, 3 damage and 2 fear. Um, Unfortunately, because it needs to be a jungle wetland, you can assume that the target land has to be that, right? Because you're not going to pay 3 energy to add a disease. That's just ridiculous. Disease is not even worth 1 energy. It's worth like 3/4 of one. So you're pretty much always choosing a jungle wetland for this card, and the 3 damage and 2 fear, it's somewhat reasonable. Now, if you do have that 2/2 threshold, you get to do 1 damage to each invader, which is nice, but it is a 0 range card, so the card is fairly situational. 0 range, must target a jungle wetland, and then the effects here are equal to a 3 cost. But like I said, you have these 2 restrictions that you need to fight through. I think it's a very solid bottom C tier card for those reasons. Okay, settle into the hunting ground, 3 energy fast, moon, fire, plant, animal, targeting yourself. Your presence counts as badlands and beasts. Your presence cannot move. You have 2/3, you get 2 fear, and then 2 damage in one of your lands. I I really wanted to put this in D tier, but it's a very strong combo card. Especially on a spirit like Many Minds or Fangs, it can just do so much. And since it has those very niche games where it can really carry the whole team. Well, I shouldn't say carry the whole team, but it can at least carry your board and possibly another board. I have it up here. It does suck though if you're not hitting this threshold. Just having your presence count as Badlands and Beasts tends to not be good enough. It tends to not be enough. But there are cases where this card does it has done a ton of work, and that's why it's up here in C tier. Fragments of Yesteryear. It's a 7 energy slow. Sun Moon is a 0 range. You pick a land, remove all pieces, then add pieces so target land's contents match its setup symbols. If you have the 3 Sun, you may make it fast. If you have the 3 Moon, you don't add any of the invaders or remove any of the positive tokens and pieces from the land. This is another NI major. I'm a little disappointed. I think we just missed it. When I first saw the card, I thought it was weak. Then I played with it a bunch. Then I thought it was okay. And then as soon as I said that, there was pretty much no way to actually boost its power. But now looking back at the card, it's definitely, I think, on the weaker end. Um, I think it has to cost 7. I think if it costed 6, it'd be fine. But I think they wanted it to cost 7. I think the trick with this card is if you just added some fear, either up here or on the moon threshold, I think that would make the card a lot more playable. The biggest problem we have with this card is it resets a land, but it doesn't progress the game's win condition. You're removing all these invaders, but you're not generating any fear, and you're paying 7 energy for it, and it's just not good enough a lot of times. But it's still in C tier because it does cost 7 energy. It is able to um, save a land in quotations. That is pretty good. Okay, we have Vanish Softly Away. It is a 3 energy slow Moon Air. 2 range, you may remove an invader and a building explorer, or remove all damaged invaders. And then it says if you have 3 moon and 3 air, in any 2 lands with 4 or more invaders, remove an invader. So I find the threshold to be really underwhelming. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I find the threshold just to be very bad for a cost at 3/3. Removing an invader and a town in the slow, I mean, this is medium. I think it's yeah, just slightly below threshold. I don't know how or what I would do to boost the power. I think probably just adjusting this threshold a little bit, maybe making it a 3/2 or a 2/3. Um, but yeah, I don't know what to do with this card. It never feels good enough. I mean, there are some spirits that want it, like you take Lure from it, for example, would love that card. But a lot of spirits just pass up on this. We have Melt Earth into Quicksand, 4 energy fast. It's a Moon, Water, Earth. 1 range, targeting a Sands wetland. 1 fear, 2 damage, and isolate the target land. After invaders Dahan are moved into target land, destroy them. And then you have this expensive 2/4/2 threshold for more damage and some tokens. Once again, the threshold is very tough to hit. I do think what you're getting for the threshold is pretty reasonable, though I wish this was just a little bit reduced, and then maybe you reduce the damage here. Because 2/3/2 is more attainable. 2/4/2, you're rarely going to see it. Um, I have it up here in C tier, and that's because it has that combo potential. Whenever invaders are moved into target land, you wipe them out. So you can combo this with a lot of control spirits, as well as spirits like Finder, River, all of that, or like control powers like Irresistible Call, stuff like anything that moves a lot of invaders, and you just completely wipe them out. It also has some text that like Russia or France, where you get to do that fast damage and you isolate the land, which is excellent, killing those explorers, and it could be a way to stay below that town count. I definitely think, I'm trying to think if it's maybe mid C tier. I'll leave it at the bottom of C tier, but I think this is one of the better cards in this list here. If I had to say the worst card in C tier or bottom of C tier, I'd probably say it's Settle into the Hunting Ground, as I previously mentioned. It doesn't do anything for 3 energy a lot of the times, but that also could just be a problem with the spirits that I'm playing. Looking at the middle of C tier, we have another NI major, Unearth, a Beast of Wrathful Stone. It's a 5 energy fast, Moonfire Earth animal, Sacred Site range, targeting a land with invaders. After the next invader phase on any turn with no ravage or build actions in target land, you get 3 fear, 12 damage, add a beast. Then you may push the beast. 1 fear and 2 damage in its land. And then if you have this crazy 2/3/3 threshold, the beast gets marked and cannot leave the island. And then every turn, that beast gets to move, dealing damage and fear. This is one of my favorite majors in the NI expansion. Though, just like a lot of other majors in C tier, it's very niche. The fact that it is very expensive at 5 energy, it's a sacred site targeting 1 range, so it's hard to make this card work. And then the targeting is restricted, combined with you have to target a land that's not ravaging or building, means having this card trigger can be very difficult. And then you get a lot of value if you can threshold it, but the threshold is 2/3/3, which is very difficult for the spirits that exist in the game. I think this is a very solid C tier card. I think the only change I would make is just increase the range of it to 2 range. I think if this was 2 range, I think it would be perfectly fine, probably at the top of C tier. But because it has this 1 range, it's very restricted in where you can actually play this card. Of course, the right answer is just lower the cost, but I think if it's 4 costs, it's way too strong. So, okay, so spill bitterness into the earth, 5 energy fast, fire, water, earth, 0 range, 6 damage, add 2 badlands, strife, and 1 blight, and then up to 3 adjacent lands with blight. You may add badlands or strife. You have this crazy 3/3 threshold in up to 3 adjacent lands, 1 damage to each invader. I actually think this card is pretty reasonable. It actually might even be top of C tier, but really the biggest problem is it's 5 energy, so it's expensive, and it's 0 range. And then you're adding blight in that land, so you're going to end up killing your presence. So it tends to cost a presence as well. Now, there are some spirits like Volcano or Stone that can kind of get around this, but a lot of times the Blight will come down and destroy your presence. But 6 damage, fast for 5 energy is better than Talons, and like I said, Talons gets play. Now, this does cost a Blight, so yeah, there is that downside. Now, the threshold, 3 fire, 3 water, I wish it was not fire water. If this was like fire earth, um, I think it would be a lot easier to hit for spirits, but there are very few spirits that utilize a lot of fire water. Really, the only one is Vengeance and Serpent. I guess the only two, the main two. But the threshold is very powerful. 1 damage to each invader in 3 adjacent lands, and it's comboing with those bad lands that you put with the top part of the card. So very, very strong threshold. Unlock the Gates of Deep's Power, 4 energy. It has all of the elements. Target a spirit. That spirit gets to look at 2 majors and gets to keep one of them without having to get a power card. You have 2 of every element. That spirit may play that card without paying its cost, and then it will gain all of the thresholds. And then if that spirit can pay for it, they get to keep the card. Or I guess if they could pay half of the cost, they get to keep the card. I think this is pretty reasonable. I mean, the threshold is great. I mean, it has all elements. It's 4 energy fast. I mean, it's slightly below the power curve. I mean, if I were to make a single change, I think if the top part also granted a minor, I think that's what Emily did to change the card. I think it would be very okay. But I think the main reason why it's not higher up is it doesn't impact the board, and it's more setting up a future turn. And a lot of times when you're grabbing a major, you need the major to impact the board directly. And this is a card that doesn't do that. Basically says, hey, why don't you try to impact the board in another turn? And then it costing 4 energy. 4 energy is very expensive. Most majors are going to cost between 2 and 3, or at least these are the best majors in the game. So once you exceed that 2/3, the card really has to be impactful. And this is a card that really isn't. Now you can do some really crazy combos, especially if you threshold it, but thresholding it tends to be very difficult for spirits. Looking at the next card, we have Angry Bears. It's a 3 energy slow, Sun Fire Animal, 0 range, 2 fear, 2 damage. If no beasts are present, add a beast. Otherwise, plus 2 damage. So for 3 energy, you get 4 damage and 2 fear. And if you have the 2/3 threshold, 1 fear, destroy a building, and an adjacent land with beasts. I think this card is pretty reasonable. I think it's very close to just being just good enough. I think if you increase the damage by 1, this is 3 damage, I think you got yourself a pretty solid card for 3 energy. But it is fairly situational, it being 0 range, and also requiring a beast. Strangling Firevine, 4 energy, slow power, fire plant, targeting 1 range from a sands, destroy all explorers, add a wilds in the originating sands, and then 1 damage per wilds in/adjacent to target land. So lots of damage into that one target land. Now, if you have that threshold, that 2/3 threshold, you get a ton of extra damage. I think the biggest problem with this card is I think it's very well, it's niche. I mean, that's why it's in C tier. But since it's doing damage based on the number of wilds, it's not really killing buildings. Um, so this is a card that's very specialized. It's excellent versus Russia, France, HME, those types of adversaries. But against an adversary like England or Scotland, you're going to get a lot less value from this card. Um, trying to think what I would do because like it is a plant card, so this is a card that I do pick up quite a bit on routes. Um, though a lot of times it's just very expensive, so it's somewhat limited, even on a spirit that can threshold it on 2 plays. And cast down 9 energy slow, sun, moon, water, earth, sacred site targeting a coastal, 6 fear, destroy all invaders in the land. And then if you have this amazing 2/2/4 threshold, you get to destroy the entire board. A very fun, powerful card. This is the reason why some 6/6 compositions can be beat, is because of this particular card. Um, I think at its best, it's one of the best cards in the game, but that requires a lot of support, a lot of setup. It requires a specific adversary. Like if you're playing against Prussia, this card isn't going to save you the game. So there's a lot of factors that need to be set such that this card can be impactful. Um, I do find the card fairly useful even without the threshold. You'll see myself picking this card up on routes, or I have it in my eyes games where I just need a card to deal with that big coastal land, and just completely wiping it out, especially into England, can be very beneficial. Um, but that is why it's in C tier, is just because it costs 9 energy. When you're not thresholding it, it's just not a good card. It's definitely below the power level. But when you are thresholding it, that's when it is one of the best cards in the game. Looking at the top of C tier, we have Storm Swath. It's a 3 energy, slow power, fire, air, water, sacred site, 1 range, 2 fear in both the origin and target land, 1 damage to each invader. And then if you have this 2/3/2 threshold, it gets +1 range, and then you get a fear, and then you get to do 1 damage to each invader in a land that's adjacent to both of the lands. And then in lands where you did damage, destroy buildings. So it's definitely at the top of C tier because there's a lot of uses for this card. Great into France, Russia, HME. You can also target the same land with Storm Swath, like target itself, and then you get to do 2 damage to all invaders in that one land. Um, and then it also comes with fear, and it also can kill buildings. So it's kind of crazy when you compare it to cards down here like Mist of Oblivion, right? A card that is just, I said it was so bad in D tier, and just like a direct comparison, Mists, the Storm Swath, you just get so much more, right? You're getting 2 free fear, it costs 1 less, and it has 1 damage to each invader again. So you just, that's why a card like Mists is down here, and then Storm Swath is up here. So Storm Swath is just a much better card than Mists. We have Tsunami, 6 energy, slow power, Sacred Site, 2 range, targeting a coastal land, 2 fear, 8 damage, destroy 2 Dahan, water, earth. And then if you have the threshold, it says in each other coastal land, 1 fear and 4 damage. I think this is a very solid card in C tier. I don't know what I would do to change it. I think if you just increase the damage just a little bit more on the top part, I think it would be pretty reasonable for its cost. Really, the biggest thing that's holding this card back is it only can deal with coastal lands, which is okay. But once you get to that B, A tier, and S tier, those are cards that are very, very flexible. They're very cheap, and this card isn't cheap, and its targeting isn't flexible. But there's definitely going to be games where you'll have this card, you'll play it against like Scotland or whatever, and it will completely clear your coast, or maybe Prussia or France. Like there'll be games where this will be a game-winning card. So Dream, the Untouched Land, one of my favorite majors in the entire game. It's a 6 energy fast, moon, water, earth, plant, animal, sacred site, 1 range. Remove up to 3 blight and up to 3 health worth of invaders. And then if you have this crazy threshold, you get to add a board to the island. and then you get to add a bunch of tokens. You get to prolif here, and then adversary actions skip one board, and then you get to skip a build on one of the boards. Um, One of my favorite majors in the game. The only reason why this card isn't higher is just because this top part is just not good enough. I believe Emily's change is she made it 6 energy or 6 health worth of invaders, and I think that's pretty fine. But at 6 energy, remember you need to be impacting the board, and a lot of times this blight healing, you'll heal one blight. Very rarely you'll heal more than one blight unless they're set up, unless you're wasting more actions to combine the blight together. And then the threshold is very difficult to hit. So a lot of times this card just can't really be played. Though luckily, my favorite spirit in the game, Towering Roots, can threshold it on 3 plays, which I think is pretty awesome. But yeah, this is one of my favorite majors in the game. It's just that top part, the non-thresholded part, that needs to be better. Very similar to Cast Down, where like you'll have some games where you'll play with it, but unless you're thresholding it, it's just not good enough. Ravaged Undergrowth slithers back to life. The 3 energy slow power, water plant animal. Sacred Site 1 range targeting a land with Blight. Replace a Blight with a Wilds, 1 fear, 3 damage. You may push that Wilds. I guess it doesn't say may. You have to push it. You have a 3/2 threshold. You get to add another Wilds. You may push this Wilds. And then in each land with Wilds within 1 range from target land, you may push an Explorer and Town to lands without Wilds. And once again, does not look like there is a may. That's just a bad habit. So very similar to Angry Bears for 3 energy. You're going to be doing quite a lot of damage. That 3 damage, you then get to remove a Blight and add a Wilds. I think this is a lot more balanced than Angry Bears, and there could be an argument that it is in low B tier. Um, and then the Threshold is this massive control style effect. The reason why this card isn't higher is just because when you're thresholding this card, or the spirits that can threshold it are already water plant based, and these are spirits that tend to not blight a lot already. And this is a blight removal effect, so you're not having much blight on your board to begin with. And for these types of spirits, so they really just can't make use of this card. And good examples would be like Downpour or Green, spirits that already have plenty of blight healing in their kit that can threshold this card, but this is a card that they really just can't make it work. A spirit that can make it work would be like Wounded Waters. You decide to go towards that serene route. Irresistible Call, 6 energy fast, Sun Air Plant. Sacred Site 2 range targeting an inland land, gathering 5 towns, Dahan, beasts, and 15 explorers. And then if you have a 2/3/2 threshold, it's a skip and it isolates the land. Now, this is probably the best card in C tier. I have it here mainly because of that 6 energy cost, and you have to target it in the land, and it also doesn't deal with cities. There's just a lot of restrictions on this card, but this is a card that can win games, especially into Russia, France. Condensing all of the problems across 6, 7 different lands all into one land. Very powerful. But like I said, because of that cost, a lot of spirits won't be able to play the card, and then it doesn't deal with cities. So that is why it is here. Utter a Curse of Dread and Bone is a 4 energy slow moon animal. For each light in adjacent to target land, add a Badlands Disease or Strife, max of 3 of each. It is a Sacred Site 1 range, and you get 2 fear and 1 damage. So you're going to play this on a land that has a ton of adjacent blights or blight in the land. You're then going to add a lot of tokens, and then you're going to deal damage and get fear. And then if you have the threshold, you get to add, I guess, add each type of token you added, add 1 more within 1 range, and then you get a single point of damage in that land. I think the card is pretty reasonable. If the threshold was a little bit better, I think it'd be higher up in B tier. But I think the threshold is really holding it back. Draw towards a Consuming Void. It's an 8 energy, slow power, 0 range. It has no elements. You get to gather an Explorer, Town, City, Dahan, Presence, and Beast from each adjacent land, and then you get to do a ton of damage in that target land. 4 fear, 15 damage, 5 damage to Dahan, destroy 1 presence from each spirit, and remove 2 beasts. And then any number of times you may forget a minor, major, and unique to repeat this card again, and you're only allowed to do this if this is the only card in play. I think it's a very cool card. It definitely is a card that can win games, but it is that 8 energy, and 8 energy is very difficult to afford for a lot of spirits. So just by this cost, it's going to shun out a lot of spirits. Now, unlike cards like Volcanic or Cast Down, this is a card that just on the top part can almost always clear a board or get very close to. Now, one of the things that people don't realize about draw is that when you're, let's say you play it for the turn, and it says you may forget these minor, major, and unique to repeat it, you can actually forget draw to repeat the card. So if you have a minor in your hand and a unique in your hand, you can forget those two cards, and then you can forget draw to repeat it, which I think is a really cool interaction. And lastly, we have Poisoned Land. It's a 3 energy slow power, 1 range, earth, plant, animal, 1 fear, 7 damage, add a blight, and destroy all to Han. You have a 3/2/2 threshold. It says for each blight present, 1 fear and 4 damage. So essentially, it's going to give you 4 damage and plus 1 fear for the top part. I think the only reason why this card is down here is just the, well, I mean, 3 energy for 7 damage is very reasonable. It just sucks that you're blighting the land as well as destroying Dahan. This is probably another one of those cards that's at the top of C tier. Oh yeah, that's why it's here. Very close to bottom of B tier. I could see an argument for it. I think if the threshold was just a little bit better, I think it would be up there, and I think that's what's really holding this card back. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the second video of this tier list. In the next video, I'll be covering B tier and maybe A tier. I haven't decided. Once again, in all of these tier list videos, all because I have a card down maybe in C tier or in D tier or F tier, that doesn't mean it can't be used. It just means that these are cards that are going to be used far less than other cards, or they're going to have far less rewards than the cards up in my next videos. If you like this video, like, subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys in the next video.